Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Grim Dark Filthy Casuals podcast, episode 11. What do we want to call this one? What the fuck is going on with the hobby?
What the balance data slate is going on?
We're joined today by the Chicago Cowboy, Nick Powell.
Hello, hello.
We have Brian Tabata with us today.
Welcome, everybody.
And the war boss herself, Lisa Quibido.
Hi, guys.
And today we'll be talking about the new big, what are we calling this again? It's a data balance.
They call it the balanced data slate.
Balanced data slate. We'll be going through the balanced data slate and some updates with where we're at with the hobby today. But maybe Nick, kick us off. How have you been doing? Where are you at right now with the hobby? What has been occupying your time with 40K?
Yeah. So really just the tabletop, gameplay in general, Warhammer AOS and 40K. I've been taking a little bit of a step back from, frankly. I kind of stepped away from competitive 40K for a little bit in terms of actually really playing it. Over the summer, because we continued to see, the rise and the prominence of AdMech and Drukhari, and then the Orc buggy lists that were coming out. And there was very little, honestly, that excited me about the competitive landscape, frankly. And so I really got into AOS in terms of the hobby side of things. And I painted up an entire Sylvaneth army for an event that I went to last month, which was great. I've been painting a lot of Song of Ice and Fire miniatures as well. I've been building terrain to build out our own tournament, terrain sort of collections so we can run bigger and better events as we continue to grow. But what excites me the most, I think, about this balance patch, which we'll go over, in a little bit, is that it's drawing me back into the competitive 40K landscape again, and just seeing the pulse of the competitive community around the internet today. On Reddit, on Facebook, and other Discords, in our group, like it's doing that for a lot of people, and so that's what I'm really excited about. I think a lot of people felt similarly that the game was a little bit stale. You saw the same lists, the same people every week winning events.
For sure.
I think that's some of that might change, which is exciting for a lot of people.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And speaking of AOS, Brian, how You were just at a AOS event this past weekend, is that right?
Yep. James and I, we went out to Holy Havoc. It's basically a fantastic event just out in my backyard. I live about probably 12 minutes away from its location in Naperville. And for me, it's really just the ultimate blend of everything that's really special about Warhammer. For a while, I was very into the competitive scene. I'd still consider myself a very competitive player, but I do think that the real power and the real joy I kind of get out of the hobby is that there's so many different aspects about it. It's not just a strategy game. It is also, there's a lot of art that gets involved with it, right? It's a lot of painting, a lot of creativity going into making a table, making terrain, making things just to play the game and sort of in the first place. And then there's also, that sort of social aspect, the sportsmanship side of it, because it is an in-person thing. And combining sort of all those things in the best way. And honestly, for me, like Holy Havoc is probably the best event that I can really imagine. And something like that is really, as Gdfc, we always try and promote the hobby, and we try and promote sportsmanship. We try and promote smart tactical play. So finding an event where I learn all those things from it is, very special to me.
Did I hear that you were tied, or did you get voted for best sportsman? you and Bobo, is that right?
Yeah. So we were tied for favorite player, our favorite team. And, we lost, we did a roll off. We lost. James rolled a 4. He pulled his weight. I rolled a 2, and then the other team rolled a 6 and a 1. So they beat us out by 1 point.
That's hilarious. Did you flip the table?
No, but I do feel a little salty, and that's probably why I'm actually, second place for best sports. I can't actually be happy about someone else winning. But no, being even, just mentioned, I guess, in a group like that where, everyone is there to help out each other is really one of the highest awards that I can think of to be mentioned along with. So I was very excited about that and very happy. And we'll be back. We'll be back to Holy Wars this coming February, and then Holy Havoc again next year in November.
That's awesome, Brian, and I appreciate it. I had a quick moment to stop by to say hi to some of the folks that were participating at Holy Havoc and checking out your Stormcast army in person. My gosh, you have really grown in your hobby skills. Your painting has come a long way. Even you've always been a great painter, but seeing all
it's on another
NMM,
level. It is insane that you're doing this with a brush and not magic. It's crazy. Right? It's crazy.
It's absolutely incredible.
And I think that's part of it, over the last year and a half, of course, it's been a different challenge for everyone else. And, we've stepped away a little bit maybe from the kind of competitive scene, but because the hobby is so big and has so much scope, I think there's room where you can make the hobby serve a purpose for you, and it can take on different faces for you. So like for me, I've got, it's hard to get games in where we're at. It's hard to get excited about playing when you can't really get games, but the painting is still there. And that's something I was able to really kind of get behind it. For me, I love blending. I love all that stuff. So I was like, hey, let's do some non-metallic Adult Knights,
And they look awesome.
Yeah. Well,
I just love that you were like, I'm going to get really good at non-metallic metal by painting an army where everything is metal. And I'm going to make the metal look different and unique on each different texture and surface and master it. And it was just
probably one big mistake though is like, don't go to an event where Vince Venturella is also doing the same art in the same style. So
did you get any more critique from him on your painting?
No, I didn't this time.
Did he give you an attaboy?
Well, we did we talked a little bit at the end, he congratulated us on, being nominated for, best sports and all that stuff. And James was actually talking because James actually is good friends with someone that Vince used to work with at CompUSA.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Yeah. But probably one of the really cool things about the event that kind of, ties it in full circle is James ran into the guy that got him into Warhammer in general. Wow. So some 20 years ago back in Cincinnati, James is a younger man, still probably a kid at this point now, like a teenager, walked into a hobby store and was like going to go get something else and saw this guy like with a beautiful painted like B-score army and was like, whoa, what is this? And the guy was just really welcoming, really friendly, sold him on some Tomb Kings. And I guess, that was the end of it from there. So yeah, we actually got to play that guy game too. Had a really great, fantastic game, and it was a blast all the way around. So it's cool to kind of see that, in the loop. It makes it very stark. Cool, like this is what Warhammer is and can be. Not just necessarily,
it's not about your ITC ranking, and that's it.
No, and I think for a while, the big turnoff for me, like from the competitive scene, was really just like there's a lot of focus on list building, and a lot of it, and it's not just making a clever list. A lot of it is find the exploit, hammer the exploit, and a lot of it just turns into PvE. Like I'm just going to play a dice simulator. Yeah. Did I get the first turn? Can I make the
list
rolls?
Lab? Yeah.
It's far less about the decisions and the choices that are being made on the tabletop and the tactics, and it's simply all right. You put this here, I do this. Like you said, Brian, PvE is a very good analogy for it.
So yeah, but because like I said, the hobby is such a wide scope, I'm able to kind of settle into that sort of hobby side. I do prefer the sci-fi setting. I love 40K, but right now I'm AOS a lot as a game. So getting really into that and definitely excited for future Holy Wars and Holy Havoc events.
AOS has been a nice distraction for a lot of people for the last 6 to 8 months, I'd say, of 40K. And for the listeners who are not familiar with who James, aka Bobo, is, he's another one of our filthy casuals. And Brian, I think you're working on an article. There might be a picture of him there. So if anybody's looking for a reference. Bobo will be there, but James also has a very beautifully painted Stormcast army, if I'm not mistaken. And
so we were team thoughts and prayers THOTS because he had a big bunch of like chunky paladins.
Yeah.
We're throwing up prayers to Sigmar, and he answered them sometimes. Sometimes he felt us on hold. That's how it goes.
Fickle.
Yeah. I mean, is it really a prayer though? Like when you've like seen the dude and like talked to him, it's more like dialing up the landline or something.
Right. Sigmar and speed dial. Lisa, how have things been in your corner of the world?
I promise we're not turning into an AOS podcast, but it certainly sounds like it.
There would be worse things.
Right. No, Vince has an amazing podcast. Listen to Vince B's podcast on AOS. It's incredible. But no, I've been also playing a lot of AOS. And like Nick said before, I honestly have been kind of down on the competitive scene for 40K. This hasn't interested me as much as before. I also did feel it was a little bit stagnant. And this is coming from the Orc player. When the Orc book is at full tilt of just like brokenness and ridiculousness.
Only because you couldn't get buggies.
I got plenty of buggies, buddy. I have more than enough planes. But it's just like there's certain ways that I like to play the faction. And that list is definitely not one of them. And it's, for me, it felt like things that were akin back to the days of Iron Hands. It just wasn't for me. And the meta wasn't really for me. But there's a lot of things I'm excited about. For one, it's really exciting to play AOS. If you're not playing it, you should definitely give it a try. I had a summer full of Cities of Sigmar and Gloomspite Gets, and I actually went to the Michigan GT last month with a group of friends who I play with, and we had an outstanding time. It was a wonderful event, and it was wonderful to play in such a big setting. We also had a wonderful event for Warhammer Underworlds, which I got second place for and best painted.
Amazing!
My buddy
congrats!
Is now the champion and the Illinois champion. So shout out to Jason Burke, who was claiming the title state by state by state.
Just amassing territory.
Absolutely, and just occupying that time with a lot of painting too. Like I've super got into bolt action lately. I just filling my time with all sorts of things. Like I have a huge collection of 40K, right? There's always more things you can paint with it too. But like right now I'm painting these tiny little Napoleonic soldiers for black powder. I was painting World War II Joes for bolt action the other day too. And then, like, would you believe it or not, because people always say I'm the person who does not read the lore in the front of a book, and I just immediately flip over to like page 88 where the rules start for every codex I own. But somehow someone convinced me to join a Soulbound campaign for Age of Sigmar, which is exclusively a tabletop RPG, which is deeply set in the lore of Age of Sigmar, which I'm not intensely familiar with. But I've been having an outstanding time because much like the others, it's really hard to get games in. There's constantly COVID scares going around, and like you want to be cautious with your family. But it's cool to be able to like play online and role play with your buddies and keep that tightness, right? But with that said, 40K is actually exciting again. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Oh yeah.
40K is actually exciting again, yes. And with that being said, maybe we can just go straight into initial thoughts on how are you feeling about the recent, I will never get this right, the Balance Dataslate release.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like these rules are going to be set in stone. It's not slate. No, I don't think so.
Right.
But
Nick, how are you feeling about the release?
I think it's great. I think it's one of those things again where, so you guys know me potentially through the podcast, or just if you're around our Discord or on Reddit at all, you might know that I play a lot of different armies. I'm a bit of a hobby butterfly, and I wouldn't call it shiny syndrome. I'm not buying always like the new hot thing, but I do have several different armies. And so I play Necrons, White Scars, Dark Eldar, Drukari, Thousand Suns, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights. And so this, we've got codexes for a lot of those armies.
Hopefully all of them.
Now we've got some updates to my Knights, my Necrons, and even my Drukari, which makes me excited, even as a Drukari player, to see some of those units nerfed, to see some buffs given out to some of the other ones. I'm sure B-Moy has some deeper thoughts on that as well that he'll get to in a second.
Do I ever?
Why I'm excited about it is not just because, Necron's got a ton of core now and they have all these other possibilities and they can actually play the game and make it interesting. Are they top tier? I don't think so, but they're not bottom tier, and that's something to be excited about. But the most exciting thing for me about this balance pass was that GW did it at all, right?
100%.
Easily waited until January to give another Munitorum field update, part 3 or whatever, and adjust some points here and there. They could have done what they did in 8th edition and do, every 6 months, do a balance pass. And I think we just had a sort of balance pass, if you want to call it that, with the release of Chapter Approved and a few FAQs, over the summer. And so they didn't have to do another sort of mid, season, if you want to call it that, update. And I know that just talking to folks around Discords and other, social media platforms, when GW released the 40K player survey last week, that was a big topic of, hey, can you do quarterly updates? Here's what we want to see out of the game. Here's what we want to see from a competitive standpoint out of updates in errata and FAQs and staying on top of things for this game. And whether GW already had this stuff ready and put the survey out just to confirm, do people want this? And then overwhelmingly yes, and so released it, or whether they were that quick on the draw after the survey was sent out. I'm assuming it's probably Camp A, but maybe a little bit of Camp B. But I think it's just exciting to know that, hey, if you're getting, we know GSC and Custodes are coming up. We know Tau is coming up. We know Craft World Eldar is coming up in 2022. Chaos Space Marines are going to get their 2 wound update and their codexes and stuff in 2022.
Don't jinx it.
If you're not, to be fair, they could have very easily been like, here's your 2 wounds today, and didn't do that. As far as I'm aware, I read through the Chaos Space Marine stuff a couple of times. I don't think I saw that, but
no, they did not do that.
So it could have, but it gives people hope, right? If the Tau Codex comes out and it's not what you wanted it to be, 6 months down the road, you may see another update that makes it a little bit more like what you want to see, right? And so I think that's just refreshing. And as a Drukhari player that didn't play his Drukhari for 8 months because I didn't want to be that guy, and I knew it was an overtuned book, and I didn't want to be that guy. I'm happy with the fact that they didn't give this update for Drukhari, as soon as maybe they should have, because they did so much more with it for other armies that were struggling. So I'm very excited about 40K again, just because they're giving it the attention that I think it deserves.
I'm just going to add on to that. I feel like GW absolutely nailed the balanced data slate. The only thing I felt like they may have gone a little bit heavy-handed is perhaps with the Orcs. And Lisa, I would love your perspective on that. But I always felt perhaps one of each unit per detachment would be reasonable. I mean, there's still some sort of opportunity cost that you pay in CP if you wanted to bring more of the flyers there, or the those particular units that are affected. But overall, AdMech and Drukhari, I love the changes in the points. Nothing felt too heavy-handed. In fact, the fact that Coven is back on the menu, boys, makes me extremely thrilled, because as you know, I'm a big Drukhari player myself. I love the way that Coven played back in 8th edition, and it felt like you were handicapping yourself if you played a slightly more Coven heavy list. And I just prefer the look and the feel of Coven models, to be honest. Like you, and I think like Lisa as well. The funny thing is, I played Drukhari, I played Grey Knights, and even though those codexes were recently released, I did not feel the urge or desire to want to play them competitively at all. And I own 6 or 5 Nemesis, Dread Knights, and I have all 7,000K points with the Grey Knights and enough Drukhari stuff to put together a very competitive list, but did not feel the urge whatsoever to try to field those on the tabletop. It just was not interesting to me at all. But what I love about what GW has done here is that they've really they've made the changes that were necessary to just bring that balance back. I think the changes to Necrons is huge.
Huge.
The efficient shooting is something that they've just lacked, in addition to all the other tools that they have. I would not be surprised if we started to see Necrons starting to be at those top tables moving forward. And just the changes to Knights as well, I think is super cool. Makes them viable.
Yeah. It's a quality of life thing, right? And I think that's what a lot of this was for Necron players as well. Like, protocols are still terrible. They're terrible in terms of how you get them. They're terrible in terms of what units and check boxes you need to check in order to activate them. Even once you activate them, like, they're just not that useful compared to what other armies have either built in or as stratagems or as sub-factions or what have you. So there's some stuff that needs to still be done there. Points are still really expensive. Like you're still just not going to have a lot of models on the board. Like some of the lists I've been toying with all afternoon with some other Necron players in the local group that are pretty competitive involve, quick math. You're still only putting like 40 models on the table. One of them's the Silent King, so that helps. But and with the core keyword being passed out to a lot more units, more of those units are now getting back up with Rites of Reanimation, which is also great. But
absolutely.
You still just don't have a ton of, you're thin on the ground. And so you still have to be very efficient in terms of how you trade units. You have to be very, very careful with your positioning. And it's very matchup dependent. There's still going to be lists that are going to hard counter Necrons. Like, even with the changes, Drukhari, I think, have a great game plan against Necrons. And so Abnec 2, I think, still does, even with a little bit more expensive infantry. So I don't think they're going to be on top tables necessarily. I think they have a better path to get there. I think that they are absolutely a viable like RTT army now in your local group. And I think that they're going to be fun to play again for people because you're going to be in every game, right?
Absolutely.
Or there are ways for you to be in every game, right? And they now have a little bit more of that adaptability built in that keeps a faction standing in the meta longer, right? And so that I think is what's most exciting.
For variation in the list too. There's so much more core in that book now, which is fantastic because you're going to see models that look incredible that came out a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
they don't see action on the table, and now they will. You have more reason to do so. So that's super exciting. Like I'm a big proponent of seeing like variations, not just factions, but also sub factions or themes that a faction does.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, more power.
Yeah,
I would love to see it.
You'll see Praetorians on the field for the first time since 6th or 7th edition. You'll see the Ophidian Destroyers, which are gorgeous models, hell to put together, but phenomenal models. An homage to the old, 3rd edition wraiths that Necrons had. You'll still see the usual suspects, Scorpic Destroyers. You'll see the Silent King. You'll see, Technomancers and the like. You'll see your wraiths, your scarabs. Like that's all going to be there. You're still going to be Eternal Conquerors, you're still the Relentless Expansionists, like you're still gonna go that route probably competitively. There's a lot more that you can do with it, right? Like just looking at having, destroyer bombs where you're taking 3 or 4 destroyers and a Locust heavy destroyer in the same unit and hovering around, an overlord or a lord that can now affect them with their bonuses and their auras, giving them My Will Be Done for the +1 to hit, giving them a reroll 1, to wound, giving them +1 to advance to
making it sound like Necron's got a lot of stuff.
They did. It's one of those things though, because it's like the book was written with the understanding that there's basically 3 core units. And so there aren't a lot of stratagems and stuff that impact core. A lot of stratagems in the book impact specific units. So instead of saying, hey, you're going to let a core unit fight twice, it'll say flayed ones can fight twice or whatever, right? So you're not getting a lot of that stuff. But there's very specific interactions with like Rites of Reanimation, which is basically the apothecary free heal for Space Marines, where every turn a Technomancer or Illuminor Xeris can just pick a unit and that unit revives the model. Done. And Illuminor Xeris can do it twice, but
that's easy. Next question.
Only core. But now everything's core. So it's not just you're standing up a warrior or an immortal or a Lich Guard, you're standing up a Scorpic or a Wraith or a Praetorian, that
sounds good.
Sudden. That's interesting all of a sudden. So
yeah. Again, just the fact that opening up more choices, more viability with builds, creating the opportunity to put difference and more tools on the board is going to open up a lot of gameplay. I know you don't think they're going to be top table, but they
might be. I've been wrong before.
Start seeing, it was interesting. I swear we were probably the first to say that Grey Knights, we're going to see Grey Knights at top tables when everybody else was salty on them. And I think we saw a couple Grey Knights finishing top tables and winning events. And
starting to see more of them. We'll probably see more sooner than later.
Surprise.
Now that these changes are out.
Exactly right. I think Grey Knights are de facto big winners by the fact they didn't get tuned up yet. I'm sure they will in the future. But Lisa, curious, how are you feeling about the changes, especially as a resident Orc player?
Sure. One thing I'll say for Necrons real quick is I think that they're not going to be a top table faction, but they're going to be a contender. to a top table faction.
Okay, that's fair.
And a healthy game has lots and lots of factions that are top table contenders. It's not like your top 3 of Drukhari, Admech, Orc, as we saw the past autumn and summer, which was not so fun. That's what you want. You want like 8, 9, 10 factions that all have that chance at it. And now a lot of factions will have that chance. I think Orcs with these changes are a faction like that now. And they were certainly one of the 3 big mean dogs on the block that were really not a lot of fun to play. And I didn't have a lot of fun playing them, much like others have said. And some people have said the changes are too far. I disagree. I think they're good changes. Some people have said that the freebooters list is just a big face roll list. It's like the Iron Hands list of before. And they're right to a degree because it could be played as a face roll list. Just show up those models, you're going to do really, really well. You might go 4-1, 3-1, whatever it is. But there was also nuance to that list that I think a lot of people hadn't quite grasped. Why the list, like even if you like made it not so deadly, why it was still going to beat you anyways. And that entire thing is just collapsed like a house of cards. I was telling our players before, it's super tempting to buy as many squig buggies as you can for $120 on eBay right now each, but don't do it because it's not going to last. And it didn't. And it shouldn't. Maybe a year from now, the limitation of how many you can take will feel excessive, but right now it doesn't. I think the freebooter list specifically was having a super negative impact in the game, even more so than the imbalance, point-wise with Dark Eldar. It was turning a lot of people off. So it had to be changed. It had to have a hard reaction to signal, and this is a problem, and we can't accept it. With that said, Orcs is still a great faction. There's still a lot of stuff going on. There was 0 point changes for Orcs in that FAQ, which means that your squig buggies that you were spamming did not go up in points. They're still super effective. They're less effective now because you can't spam them. Docajet, same price. You're going to want to take them because they're awesome. And we're is it this weekend or is it next weekend? The Octarius book is coming out, and it has a fantastic new edition for Orc play. I'm not as enthused about the Blood Axe piece, but the Cult of Speed is so incredible. Like for me, I've been super low on playing 40K at all. I've been playing a lot of AOS. I play 40K still pretty often, but not as much as I used to. I just didn't feel energetic about it. But what's coming in from the supplement is actually making me feel really, really energetic. I have war bikers that I haven't touched in probably 3 years and have like this old hideous paint job. But now I'm like, it's time to get those off the shelf, start repainting them, and work on a list that is like super, super war bike heavy. Because that's just like, it's so orc, right? In that freebooter list, at least for me personally, I think a lot of orc players, it didn't feel orc. It felt like broken ass cheese, which is what it was. Let's be honest here. And this new stuff is like, it's thematic, right? And it's also fun, but it's also competitive too. Like you could take a list that's very much centered on what's in that supplemental book, bring it to a GT, bring it to an RTT, and have a really good time, and actually have a really good chance of placing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not going to be broken, busted. That's not what you want to bring anyways. That's not fun, I think, for most people. And I think that there could be ways that list could be super hyper-tuned to make it a really, really big contender list. Like those war bikers are still awesome. They still pump out a lot of shots. You call a speed wah, they're coming in with more AP. Like sure, you're not getting the freebooters nonsense anymore, but now you could be getting the shooting and the melee attack because they're getting both boosted melee attack and they hit that charge. I think it's awesome. It's probably still a little too alpha strikey, which is not the best thing for the game. But it should be really fun and really cool. And I'm super excited to test it out. And I'm not at all, my sales are not at all deflated by the changes in FAQ. I am very happy with them, very pleased with them.
Do you think there's an argument to be made for changing the way custom jobs work?
Yes. Custom jobs are a mess. It's really sad. Fly by the Beast was a really, really fun book for Orcs. At first, I felt kind of not the best out of it because like you compare it versus those on the Space Wolf side, and you're like, this is good, but there's clearly a better half in this book. And there was really fun stuff in it that I would have loved to bring to a competitive setting or really any setting, but then COVID hit, right? And custom jobs in that book were super cool. They could stack in all sorts of ways. And there was a billion of them. They're all over the place. And it was really fun to like think about it from a list perspective of like, what are all these fun combos? Like you can really squeeze out of it. And that was really just kind of mostly gone with the Codex. And the supplement doesn't offer anything of note in terms of custom jobs. Custom jobs needs a whole big overhaul because right now it's just not a thing you want to think about too much in the list. That's not great. Like look at something like Tyranids. They have all these like custom cool things that you add to a mod. You're thinking about it. I know you are. That's what the custom jobs need to be.
Yeah.
And you like that Tyranid stuff. And
something a little more noodly.
More noodly, right?
Yeah.
And like just have a little bit more, just some people really love the list building experience. And I love it too. And to think through all those just kind of facets of a custom job is super exciting. But yeah, it needs a rework. But it's an idea and it's been established and people like it resonated really hard with Saga of the Beast with a lot of players. So hopefully it's something that they're going to come back to and have some more ideas come out of it. So
the reason I asked too is because I think that's been a lot of the chatter online today is, okay, yeah, sure, I shouldn't be able to bring 9 squig buggies, but now because they can only take 1 unit of them, unless they're only going to take 1 squig buggy, they can't give the custom job. So even if you wanted to just take your 3, you can't, it's one of those things where you're either taking a job, but none of them are really that good that you're like, I'm willing to give up 2 more squig buggies or 2 more scrap jets for this job. So that's sort of the trade. And there's an argument to be made that that's a good thing in a competitive setting as well, right? That if you could do that and still take them in units of 3 and give them all a custom job or give one of them a custom job or whatever, then there might be some issues there too. But I know that there would be some Orc players who were building towards that freebooters list that would at least have felt a little bit more like some of the choices they made in terms of unit purchases were still going to be reflected in a good list. And to your point, I think they just decimated it entirely. It's not anywhere close to viable. So
yeah, and I still have the opinion that the Orc book is a bad book. And whether or not they were at the top of the table every month does not change the fact that the book was a bad book. I think if anything, it reinforces the fact that it was a bad book, that there was this really egregious combo that could be mined and put together and then shopped out there in this really kind of abusive sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, there's not a ton of depth in just that book by itself. And the supplement goes a pretty good way of adding some more depth to the Blood Axe side and then the Speedwall side, which are both really good areas. There's still a lot of more depth that needs to be added specifically for infantry-based lists or base lists. My boys, I love my boys, and boys aren't that great right now. And then with Walker lists. So Dreadwa is not in a great space either. So things are still pretty skewed to where they lent with the original Codex book. But you look at Dark Eldar and you say there's a lot here I could play with, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look through there in almost every war scroll. You're going to say that looks like fun.
Every single unit sees play. Literally every unit sees play, except Beastmasters. That's it.
Well, I mean, we can't win them all. But
just wait till you see my Yunari list with the Beastmasters and Razorwing Flocks.
I've seen Scar.
There's something there. Yeah. Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Great Crusade.
Lisa, anything else on the Orc side?
No, just it's not doom and gloom. I know there's a lot of negativity coming from half of the Orc side, and there's a lot of positivity coming from the other half of the Orc side. Y'all just get along. It's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah, I can hear it in your voice, right? And the excitement that this brings to a lot of maybe some more old competitive players and bringing us back into it and reinvigorating us, I think is kind of cool. And thinking about it from the Drukhari standpoint, we've touched on this. Everything in that book is viable, is good. And I'm really glad to see the changes that GW made. And we've talked about this in Discord. Basically, I thought the 2 things that they need to do is make Dark Lances cost 10 points per model and raise the points on witches, incubi, just a couple
check
units. You're down a raider, you're down 1 unit of witches, and that pretty much that solves the problem that Drukhari are too efficient at trading up, right? Still have a lot of the tools, and what we got here were some awesome bonuses too in the Coven side. I think Talos were pretty decent units to begin with, and now they get a 10-point discount as well.
They're so great.
I had played with Ravagers as well, and they get a little bit of a discount there too, which is super cool. Razor Wings and Void Ravens, I think, are viable as well. So a lot of cool builds, I think, that you'll see out of this, right? I mean, it's not going to be your super obvious witches and incubi and tons of raiders with Trueborn and all that good stuff, which you will still see.
But it still could be. I think that
still could be. Exactly.
You can still run that list instead of 30 witches. You might have 20 or 25. Instead of
right.
You might have 10. It's just enough. Instead of 7 raiders, you might have 5, and it's just enough of that wiggle room that your opponent's going to have a game with you now, right? You're
exactly right.
You still have a lot of the right tools to play the game that night that it play. You're going to score a lot of points on primary. You're going to trade up very well still, because 18-point incubi are just as good at trading up as 16-point incubi.
Exactly right.
Spoiler alert, right?
But that's also the point, though, as well. You have one less piece to think about your trading up. So you now have to actually think about it and make a choice on when do I start that game, right? Which is exactly what Drukhari needed. So overall,
they need a little bit of the finesse.
Absolutely. They needed just a little bit more. It couldn't be super obvious. Now they're going to have to think a little bit more. And I'm tempted to take all the Drukhari back out and actually put them on the table and take them outside of Ynnari and give them the old Gdfc try here. So really excited about that piece of it. Anything else on Drukhari?
There's a couple of key things that I was shocked didn't change. Like you were seeing people start taking
Hellions,
the Courts of the Archon for While We Stand We Fight, which is now called To the Last. Hellions didn't change. I think partially because I think there's a lot of chatter about this online too. So I'm probably just repeating talking points that other people have already said. But with the rise of the orcs, the buggies, and with the rise of Grey Knights a little bit here too, Hellions are less good into those matchups. So I think maybe that might be why they didn't see any major points. But they're still a great little unit. They still deal pretty solid mortal wound output. They will still pick up things that aren't Dread Knights. Things that
I still love cheap units of Hellions to get onto an objective to do an action and to start the trading.
Bingo.
They're tough. They're tough, and they can do those actions, which the opponent will see that Hellion, they'll go for it. Now you can start the trade game, and you get them out of position with them. I think that's an underrated role for the Hellion.
Reavers didn't change.
Yep.
Venoms didn't change. You're starting to see some Venom spam lists start to rise up. Sean Naden played one famously a few weeks ago, did really well before being tabled by Orc Buggies on the final table in turn 2. And so, I think you'll see some of that stuff. Scourges are still good. They didn't change.
Yep.
Part of me was hoping we might see a little bit of a discount on Scourges because they do suffer from the heavy penalty, despite basically only being able to equip, for the most part, heavy weapons. So that's a little bit tough. I would have liked
Drazar stayed the same, right?
Drazar stayed the same, which is also big. But again, they hit him with a points nerf early on, and I think that's about right for him because he is. If you can hit him, if you can get him to fight last, like you can kill him, right? But that's the trick. If you don't, he'll blend.
Yeah.
But, all the big hitters got, I think, appropriate measured points hikes where they needed it. Succubi are still valuable. You're still going to see them, but they're not the best trade up unit in the game anymore. Which
they're still pretty much.
It's still only 80 points, which is still really good. 80
points is not bad.
It's still really good for a triptych.
A 60 point Succubus was just ridiculous.
So they basically swapped those in Homunculi, right? So which is appropriate. But no, there's still a lot of good there. You'll still see them playing really well. But again, I think it gives people a lot of these changes just give people a game again, right? Yep. And I think, a lot of the whining that you see online, to Lisa's point about some of the orc players and stuff, I think people are still thinking about this in terms of the meta of literally 24 hours ago, right? A lot of stuff's going to change. Admech lists are going to be different. Drukhari lists are going to be different.
Thank God.
More Necron lists than you did before. You're going to run into more Imperial Guard lists than you did before. You're going to be running into more Knight lists than you did before, right?
Knight Gatekeeper lists are back.
I mean, you're going to be running into different Orc lists, and I think that it's going to take a few months probably for that to shake out, and then we're going to probably see a points update in January again. So I think we're going to see maybe a month here of these changes being played out to kind of see what that does to the meta a little bit. And the points changes will impact that a little bit. We'll have a couple more codices coming. I think it's a really exciting time for the game. And I think that, to Lisa's point, is the Orc book a bad book? Maybe compared to Admech Plains and Drukhari that were feeling like 200 points overcosted. Will it shake out differently once things settle here in a little bit?
I think that, to that point, the strength of Drukhari and Admech is they do have so many viable options. And even though I think Admech probably got hit a little bit harder with the points increases,
and the plane thing, that's big for them.
Yeah, that's definitely big for them. But it's not like there's bad units that you can't use in that book, right? I think obviously the prototypical Admech list that's been doing well is going to be revisited. There's definitely going to be some changes into that, but overall, I'm very happy with those changes. Nothing felt heavy-handed with the points increases. I think they were right aligned with what I would have expected. I don't know if anybody else feels like there's anything out in the Admech points changes that were egregious, but if everything felt pretty good to me when I looked at it.
It felt reasonable.
I think it's good,
and the plane change is good for them too.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the Admech flyer spam was as obnoxious in certain ways as the Arc flyer spam was.
Oh yeah,
I mean it was probably the precursor to the obnoxious Orc list.
Yes, and there's certain ways that you can position them that makes it even more of a pain in the ass. But there's more to both than just their shooting that makes you get really frustrated with that list. It's also the spatial issues that they cause.
Yep.
And reducing them to only 2 per list is super important to make sure that spatial issue isn't just really making it not a game on turn 1.
Yeah.
And I'm not an Admech player, but did they get any points decreases?
Yeah,
Yes.
on the Castellan robots.
No.
Big derpy robots got it.
Gotta love the robots.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Beamoy. So I've been rereading Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, which is a lot of fun. And that's kind of like the prototype for the Rogue Trader. So as our resident Custodes / Grey Knights player, I'm personally super excited about Rogue Traders. I own a bunch of Rogue Traders. I love to hobby them. I love to kit bash them. I think they're so freaking fun. And you've heard it right here, folks. Best in Faction 2023 for whatever the fuck they're calling Rogue Traders these days in Philly GW speak. That's
Astra Telepathica? Is that what they call
that's me.
it?
Best in Faction is you wait. Take it to a super major. But do you see any place for that Rogue Trader and his entourage in your super elite list?
Oh, absolutely. I think especially for Custodes, I think they definitely will fill a role for Custodes list. I'll be curious to see I will be curious to see with the new changes to the Custodes book, because obviously we're still theory crafting and guessing what else is going to come out. But as it stands right now, we can definitely see a place for them with Custodes. Grey Knights to an extent, but Grey Knights are we've got a lot of deep strike to begin with. We have servitors that can sit back and get on objectives. We do have some mobility with interceptors as well. So a little bit more on the Custodes side as it stands right now, but I'm very curious to see how the new Custodes book fleshes out, especially because I haven't loved all of the new books thus far in terms of like how they feel and play on the tabletop. I love the way the Custodes played in 8th edition. The fact that they have so many options available to them via stratagems, layered defenses, the ability to force your opponent to move out of position and taking advantage of that to pick apart your opponent piecemeal bit by bit was one of the defining ways that I love to play Custodes. And I haven't loved the direction that GW has gone in taking away some innate abilities, forcing them to stratagems. And that's part of what I've always loved about the Custodes book. You just have so many options to us. And I hope that they don't take a lot of those options away. So we'll see. Sorry, that kind of segued from a different conversation, Lisa, but short answer, yes. I think there could be some play there.
It's gonna be an exciting release between GSC and Custodes. GSC has always been something that's kind of been on the back of my mind of like, I like pushing around lots of little models. This could be for me.
Yes.
The price tag of like buying all those guys, kind of go, I don't know.
If you've got $1,500 burning a hole in your pocket, then boy, do I have the army for you.
Exactly. Those models are beautiful.
Do you like losing with an army that costs 3 times as much as every other army? It's like, but maybe not soon. We'll see what they end up doing with them. But I'm excited for GSC players too. I just think when they came out, they were the thinking man's army, thinking person's army, excuse me. And they were very, very noodly. Like there were a lot of interactions that needed to be played in the correct, order for things to go well. And if you missed a step, you were toast. And so I think a lot of players were really drawn to that. And I think they did
very rewarding.
They did very, very well in the hands of a few really good players. And then those sort of lists again sort of leaked out into the wider community. And then you saw bike spam and you saw those other things, aberrants, the Muscle Beach list and stuff like that. And you still do see, some mixed hive mind lists doing pretty well with a little contingent of acolytes and flamers and because some character support, things like that. So I'll be interested to see how that expands out. And I'm very eager to see how their overall army identity changes in ninth, because GW is not printing any more of those little markers and blips. Like I think they said as much, but even if they haven't, like I promise you, they're not going to do that anymore. So how are they going to rebuild some of that flavor into this army to make them just really, really killer at that deployment phase, if you want to call it that? Because that's really what they've excelled at is the tricksiness, right? So I'm super, super eager to see how that shakes out, and I'm very excited for our local GSC players. And they're in a similar boat to how I've been today with my Necron list building, in that just the announcement of their codex, they are just so excited to be back in the lab, like list building again, and trying to come up with ideas. And that's a really fun spot to be in.
Couldn't agree more. All right, we got a couple other armies to touch on. Nick, do you want to speak quickly on knights?
Oh yeah, I'll speak very quickly because I've been speaking a lot. Knights, just a quality of life improvement, right? They still. So the biggest problem with knights is that first of all, who doesn't like big punchy robots, right? Like there is definitely a draw to that type of play and that type of army. I love them. I think they are so much fun to build and paint. I think there's a lot of room on them for freehand, which I don't paint on them, but there's still a lot of room for it, which is great. And they're very characterful, and so they're a lot of fun to sort of build sort of the lore behind your army as well, even in a competitive setting. But where they really lack is, a knight is one model, and the rules of 40K say that if you're holding an objective with one model and the enemy has two models, the enemy holds it, right? Unless your one model's objective secured. Well, we don't have any of that in the book. So this was a huge quality of life improvement, just to say, your Armiger Knights, they are going to have objectives secured now. So now you can safely, go and throw those up against any unit that's not objective secured and steal an objective and start scoring primary. And then all the big knights aren't objective secured, but they count as 10 models. And Armigers count as 5 models. So, if you're sending an Armiger against an MSU Space Marine unit, like you're going to contest it. No one's going to hold that. They're going to have to devote some real bodies to actually stealing objectives from you. And a knight, same deal. Like 10 models. There's a lot of armies running sort of smaller squad sizes, and you're basically then saying, okay, well, I'm not gonna, like my White Scar list doesn't have a 10 model unit in it. So that means I have to go kill a knight if I want that objective. You know what I mean? So. Or throw objective secured at it for sure, but then guess what? Those intercessors, those incursors, they're getting stomped, they're going to get murdered.
Right.
It's not a good trade. So there's just a lot of stuff there that suddenly makes them just that one small change to make it like AOS Gargants.
Yep.
Makes them exciting to play again. I don't think you'll see a lot of change in lists. I think you'll still see, 3 Knight Majera and 4, Lightning Lock Armigers, or you'll see Warglaves. You might see some lists that are like a Castellan and like 6 Armigers. You might see some, or 7 Armigers, or I guess no, you see more than that. You probably just like 8 or 9 Armigers, right? If I'm doing the mental math right. So you might see some of that stuff too, just to do some more board control and basically be like a stat checklist. Hey, do you have enough Dark Lances?
Right. But the night matchup is no longer just going to be a bloodbath. They're actually going to be able to compete.
They can score. Like how do you win games? You get points. How do you get points? Hold objectives. How do you hold objectives? Be models, plural. So it's a good change.
Still some challenges on secondary, but we won't touch on that. Awesome. Let's quickly do Chaos Space Marines. Brian, I'll ask you to maybe chime in on this one as well. But the slight change to how Death to the False Emperor works, in that now I think it's each time the model makes a melee attack on a 6+, they score 1 additional hit on I think it's a hit roll of 6+, which means it can be modified now, right? They score 1 additional hit, a melee hit, right? So it's not, you don't get another attack, you score an additional hit. I think it's super fascinating because it's no longer just against Imperium, it applies to anyone.
Yeah, so now Tau and Orc are, I guess, heretical enough to counter the power.
They didn't say which emperor.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting that they didn't change the name of it. I guess they don't have to, but they're so mad about the emperor that everyone is the enemy, and that's fine.
It'd just be like Blood Angels. They just think they're fighting the emperor every time.
Just hazy vision, just everything. Yeah. But I mean, it's a good change. I mean, I do think, again, like they could have very easily added one more sentence that said, P.S. everyone has 2 wounds, or 3 if you're a Terminator. That would have been a huge change. That everybody, 2 years ago, they basically told us that was coming, and then, Chaos Space Marines still haven't seen it yet. So, but no, this is a big one. This definitely makes it more deadly. If you can't have more wounds to stay survivable, you can at least have more attacks to take out other armies who also got more wounds before you did, right? So that's a big one.
Yeah, I've always thought like Chaos Marines should be the offensive Marines. So I like them fitting in that. They're deadly, like making them a little bit more deadly in combat. They all have like chain swords and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, overall, it's a good change. I think overall for me, the Dataslate, anything that improves internal balance in a book is a big win, right? Gives you more ways to play, helps sort of even the playing field. But for me, I'm definitely trying to temper the expectation a little bit, because in some sense, it's really just sort of they hired a graphic artist, right, to do the FAQ. Don't get me wrong, it's good they released it.
They got the experience design right.
It's good they released it. They're taking the game in excellent directions. That's great. But realistically, like they've done a lot of the changes are similar to what I think we would have seen done before to fix other things. So, it's good. It's about time they're kind of doing it. It's good they're doing it, but I don't necessarily look at it as like some brand new chapter.
Sure.
How GW is sort of doing things. For me, it's like, this is still the way the game goes. It's good. It's heading in the right direction, but it's not like some new miracle thing that has come out.
And I know I've been one of the vocal proponents of it being this like really great thing for GW and like what a direction they're taking us in. They're listening to the players and all that stuff. And I think the biggest thing, and you're right, like some of these things
this is table stakes, to be honest.
In a April FAQ during 8th edition, right? Like it's not that crazy. I think the thing for me that makes it so impactful is that it's going to be quarterly moving forward, which I think is a much faster. I mean, it's twice the pace that we had in 8th edition. So I think that's exciting because it just means throughout.
Right. I would say temper the expectation though, because faster doesn't always mean better.
Sure. It to me, that means better in the sense that you won't have to wait 7 months for 2 armies to lose a 60% win rate. In theory, maybe that's not true, right? But I think.
Right, but I mean, for me, I see this and they're like, well, I mean, quarterly update is great, but where's Tal in this?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you could argue that they're getting a new like Warrior Craft Worlds and all this, right? There's, and the people argue, well, they're going to get a book soon. It's like, well, I mean, but then that still means they're waiting, right? They didn't get it. They're still the team that's kind of waiting out. So
one thing I do think this does address a little bit is what we talked about earlier, Brian, is sort of that exploit hammer. If we're releasing quarterly updates, I think it takes away some of the incentive for that meta chasing. It takes time to build up and paint an army to get it on the table. If you know that exploit might be addressed within a quarter, you're not going to see as much of that, which I think is good for the game.
Yeah, I think over time, the natural timeline will sort of become more apparent. I think because if we see quarterly updates and they're impactful, great. That's what we needed. But if the quarterly updates, we sort of, it's like a new book comes out and then Drukhari are like omitted from the big FAQ update because they're too new. What happens to all the books released in that 3-month time span in a quarterly update? Mm-hmm. And then guess what? If the actual impactful updates are every 6 months, like, well, we're back to where we started. And it just means that, the timing, maybe semi-annual is the way to go. Maybe quarterly is. I think we'll see. I don't think it's going to be. Just the fact that they're doing it more often, I don't think it's necessarily going to suddenly improve things. I think we'll just have to see if that's actually how.
Why can't you just let us have this
effective
right
they can
now?
react to it? Well,
You're yucking my yum.
Well, no, I mean, and I think
I
Brian's
don't think that. I think it's just
right. Like you
temper the
do
expectation
see,
a little bit. I mean, we were all
That's
very
fair.
high on ninth
That's fair.
division, right?
I agree, and you're right. Like look at it this way, right? Like we know GSC and Custodies are next month. Great. We know Tau is January. Great. We've heard rumors that Craft Worlds is like early Q1 or
Please.
right. So maybe March, maybe April, whatever. Great. But to your point, they didn't include any of that stuff here. So the next quarterly update we get, they still probably won't see any changes because they will have either just gotten a book or will still be just about to get one. And so for those armies, that's 4 of the, that's like 20% of the factions in the game aren't getting any of these changes in this update or probably the next one. The earliest they'll see an update is probably chapter approved. And at that point, to your point, it's like, well, the quarterly update didn't do much for 20% of the game, right? So I get that perspective as well. And then we'll see that trend continue where, hey, they're going to start redoing, probably the 8th edition Space Marine supplements. And like in a year from now, we might have a new White Scar supplement and a new Iron Hand supplement. And like, are they going to get patched right away? Probably not, right? So they'll probably wait till chapter approved. So you're right that there's going to be a not insignificant percentage of the game that is not touched in these balance patches when they come out. But why I still think that it's overall a positive thing for the game is even if the cynical take of, well, they just took half of what they were going to release in January and released it in November, and they're going to take half of what they would have released in July and release it in April or whatever. Like, okay, but even that is, I think, better than only delivering the content twice a year if some of the stuff is egregious. So I think,
yes, but I would just say it's not twice as much. It's not twice as good, right? Twice as often isn't twice as good. Like they're giving up a little bit of something to do that. But like I said, it could be the right schedule. We'll see. I think we'll have to see what happens over the next few months, what the schedule is. Maybe it's timely. Maybe it's on point. If they keep hitting the balance of this like they are, great. The game will become much healthier for it. But if it's sort of missing the books and books are kind of falling out of the cycle, like the cycle's too fast, well, it'll just sort of in the same spot. So
yeah, I think too, so I think we don't have a lot of reason right now to believe that it won't be a positive thing for the game. So I'm hesitant to say that it won't be. But I also think they were pretty transparent about this one, about it being what was going to come out in January. And they just said, you know what, because of the state of the game, we're releasing some of this stuff early. We may see a different trend in terms of what is released,
Maybe, but you can't draw trends from a single point. So like I said, we'll see over the next
in
few
either
months.
direction. So
yeah,
I don't
could
think
be
there's any
positive,
reason
could be good.
to not be excited about more.
My hope is with people like Mike Grant on the team officially, they're fighting to push something in some direction. So maybe this is the beginning of it. We'll see.
So one thing we haven't touched on yet, and Bobo would kill us if we didn't, we'll save the best for last, Astra Militarum. And I am admittedly not a guard player, but Lisa, thoughts on any of the changes to Astra Militarum there?
I'm a casual guard player, not a competitive guard player by any means. And I think the changes that you see right now are more centered towards a casual player than a competitive player. None of these changes are going to change where Imperial Guard are in a competitive setting. They're not common picks. Lehman Russes and Guardsmen is what I mean. You see very, very different stuff. But for a person who brings these casually to play with their friends on a weekend, and you were constantly sad that your Lehman Russ was immediately destroyed by some multi-melta as soon as the guys landed from the teleportarium, that might not be the case as much. They're going to live a little bit longer, which is awesome. And the guardsmen that you do field, which especially new Imperial Guard players do field, a lot of guardsmen, they're going to be a little better. So in all, good changes. I think they still definitely need to have their book come out to really get where they need to be.
For sure.
To be one of to get to the point where they're one of those factions that, not a top tier faction, but they can get in there from time to time. They're not there now, and this change doesn't get them there. I don't think it's going to change them at all, but they're going to feel better for most people that actually play them, which is a good thing.
I do like how they leaned into their unique mechanic in the orders. They made the orders a little more compelling, and there's a little more interaction and stuff that you can do there.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the funnest things about Imperial Guard is that whole kind of like there's the guy yelling at you to do better from the back of the field, and then like you have like one team of grunts passing along the message on to the guy who's in front of them, like, hey, the boss in the back says y'all better like get in there and do some stuff. And then they
careful. The rules writers are going to turn into the telephone game where you got to roll a d6 for every order you pass, and on a 1 the order turns into something else.
But they're playing with an interesting space with it, right? And Imperial Guard can certainly use a little bit more unique aspects to it, or mini games to it, or different facets of it to make them stand out more, especially when you have like, crazy off the wall stuff like GSC. So I'm excited to see the book. I know the other Imperial Guard players that I associate with are excited for it too. But until then, I think most of the ones that are heading into tournaments are still choosing other factions, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that about covers it for the balanced data slate. Any closing thoughts on the new release there?
I'm super happy this FAQ happened before the Gdfc tournament in December. We are hosting another tournament in December, which is sold out. Sorry, guys, can't join. But I'm so pleased that we don't have to deal with some of the obnoxious stuff that was going on in the meta before this release happens. And this will be one of the first post-FAQ events happening. So to our players out there, study hard these changes and do some list finagling, and don't bring freebooters.
Or do and lean into the lore, but don't expect to table people.
Exactly, right? Bring the pirate ship, a battle fortress that looks amazing, and just,
Well, at least I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Just maybe a couple of quick updates for the listeners and where GDFC is at. We've been working very diligently, I think Nick, as well as Eric and many others, in trying to put together as much terrain as humanly possible for us to really start focusing on trying to host some regular events in the Chicagoland area moving into 2022. We do have the tournament scheduled over at the Dice Dojo in December. We'll be working on trying to get some more regular RTTs, and fingers crossed we'll get some GTs going on in 2022. So a lot more coming there. We've got some fun collaborations that are in the works. I think scheduled for early 2022. So we have that to look forward to as well. And
a little hint: some of us have had to update our passports to complete this upcoming thing. So
that's right. Or get a passport. Period.
Passport. Or get one for the first time.
Right. So we have
that's a lot working in the background. We haven't been idle. We've just been behind the scenes.
Yeah. And a lot of that too is kind of what we addressed on the show tonight, right? Is because it's hard to write and film, articles and battle reports if your heart's not in it. If you think that, the game that you love is not as good as it could be, right? And so I think that's something we've all sort of suffered from a little bit. But we knew ultimately what we wanted to do with this group, and really it was to help build a stronger community of competitive and competitive players and hobbyists here in Chicago, which has, for as big of a city as it is, has been a very disparate, community, a very fractured community for a very long time, for as long as any of us have been in the hobby. So,
sure.
Being a central hub of, organizing events and not just RTTs, but GTs, majors eventually, and finding the right partnerships there to do that, I think is going to be ultimately the best thing that we can do for the community that we love. So that is really where our focus is, and where my focus has been in terms of endlessly building terrain for the last 6 months. So everyone who is a fan of the group and what we do, thank you for your patience. Any of the local Chicagoans who are in the Discord who, shoot the crap with us and build lists and talk about the game, thank you for your patience. More to come. We're working to make this a really good community
for sure
for everybody.
And the other thing really quickly here is the GDFC mission statement, right? Is we're really focused on trying to build a very diverse and inclusive community, and not just focused on the hyper competitive players, right?
Yeah.
But that's why we call ourselves the filthy casuals. Those of us who can enjoy every aspect of the game, as well as just the social aspect as well. For most of us, 40K, spoiler, is not our top or secondary priority, maybe not even our third priority in life. We've got careers, families, and COVID was tough for many of us. Some of us had children. Some of us started new jobs. Some of us moved. Some of us are becoming doctors and doing a lot of interesting things. And we support each other and our community through that. I think some of the cool stories that we've been able to share through GDFC is individuals that may have gone through hardship, and we pulled together to support them through that. And we've done a lot with coaching and helping new players or new people to the community in the Chicagoland area get introduced to the game and teaching how to play 40K and meet new people as well. So that's one of the other things that we highly value. Community is probably one of our top priorities within 40K, and obviously events and content and all that stuff helps build that. So we're excited to continue to do that and looking forward to much more of that in 2022.
Yeah, without the community, you're not playing this game. So that has to come first, in my view.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that being said, I think that just about does it for episode number 11. Looking forward to, I think probably the next podcast we'll get out will be after our GDFC tournament, most likely. Don't think was there any books aren't going to be released prior to that, right?
I mean, not probably before
before that.
The event, but GSC and Custodes will probably be right around that.
We'll definitely get some Custodes content out there as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when Geo says December, they usually mean like the last week of December.
I know. It'll go on sale, like pre-order for 25th. You're like, gee, thanks.
Yeah, December 31st, pre-order.
Right. 2-week pre-order, so it'll be released February 10th or whatever,
October, never forget.
Oh, God.
Oh, Lord. And with that being...
Orcvember. Get rid of your buggies.
Well, on that note, thank you all for listening. This is another episode of the Grim Dark Filthy Casuals podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the battlefield.